Pale prophets or extraterrestrial ancient aliens? The pale prophet who visited the Americas in the 1st century AD certainly knew how to make an entrance the people would never forget, and the full story is told in what I, as Sean Castile says, as the author, believe to be an exciting new book. Is titled The Search for the Pale Prophet in Ancient America. That should be very interesting to read. It's published, he says, by my associate Tim Beckley, Global Communications. Beckley is now co-hosting, along with Tim Schwartz, podcast Exploring the Bizarre. Now, according to ancient native lore, we're talking about Native American legends. When the fair god first arrived at the Polynesian Islands, it was with 3 ships with giant sails like enormous birds with wings, uplifted, glowing goldenly in the dawn light. The people watching the events were frozen to immobility. "What manner of monsters are these with these great wings?" they asked in awe. And shouted one narrative, "Perhaps they have come to devour the people." When the islanders saw something white moving towards them, apparently from the great birds, the white object glided easily over the water with a rhythmical ease of a man walking. As the spot of white came closer, writes anthropologist L. Taylor Hansen, they saw in amazement that this was a fair god, man-like in form, but unlike their people. Soon they could see him clearly, the gold of the dawn light shining through around him, making a halo of his long curled hair and beard. And as he came up on the wet sand, the warrior stared in fright at his garments because they were dry. Now they knew that a god stood among them, for none but gods can walk on water. Putting aside for the time being the idea that we're dealing here with Jesus Christ himself, again displaying his ability to walk on water as recorded in the Christian Gospels, but what we have here is a classic example of ancient astronauts approaching to the flying saucer mystery. A relatively primitive indigenous culture is confronted with what may be technological marvels that the natives ascribe to gods with abilities far beyond their comprehension. The ships, the craft with sails like huge birds, with wings uplifted, for one, may be an attempt to describe a kind of flying craft that was not some form of a boat at all. But none of the great ancient astronauts researchers, from Eric von Daniken to Zachariah Sitchin to Brinsley Lepore Trench, have ever covered the same territory as the late anthropologist L. Taylor Hansen, who spent decades traveling among the Native Americans in order to collect their legends regarding the healer, the prophet, the miracle worker, god of the dawn light, the wind god, the teacher, the white-robed master. Although the names are different, the legends are chanted and sung the same. Very little is known about L. Taylor Hansen, who died in 1976. One thing that is known, however, is that her first name was Lucille, which she shortened to L so that she could pass herself off as a man, at least in literary terms. In 1918, while still a college student, she spent her summer vacation with the Chippewa Indian tribe in Michigan. According to writer Bet Stockbauer, who provides some of the scant biographical material available on Hansen, this interest was more than scholarly. The Chippewas' language and dances, their culture, their religion, struck a richly harmonic chord in Hansen's soul. Dark Thunder, the Chippewa chief, shared with young Hansen much of the tribal knowledge and told her of a holy man who had visited the tribe in long ago times. This man came to the Native Americans when their empire was united and their great cities stretched for miles. Wherever this holy man went, the miracles followed, and always he spoke of the kingdom of his father. In this brief story, Stockbauer writes, Hansen sensed a germ of one much greater, and that summer a council of many tribes was called to tell the young lady the holy legends. Her own gift of the council would be a book that would preserve their words for future seekers, and thus was born He Walked the Americas, a book pursued over 2 continents during the course of 45 years. He Walked the Americas is the title of the book. At the Indian Council meeting, Hansen was charged with the mission of recording the legends of the Pale Prophet for posterity, but in the meantime, in order to meet her expenses, she sold science fiction stories to pulp magazines, disguising herself as a man so she could succeed in a field completely dominated by the male element. In the 1940s, she was given its space for a regular column in Amazing Stories, a science fiction pulp magazine, to air her non-fiction views on the current state of anthropology and archaeology. Ray Palmer, the magazine's legendary editor, not only published her scientific mystery columns, he would also eventually publish He Walked the Americas in 1963 through his Amherst Press Company, and thus is an important figure in the overall story as well. All of the foregoing is contained in The Search for the Pale Prophet in Ancient America. In the first section of the book, I summarize and quote from Hansen's He Walked the Americas, as well as adding my own biblical insights and correlations not present in the original text of Hansen's groundbreaking work. I think perhaps Hansen felt she was writing for the more biblically literate audience of her own time, or maybe she felt that the biblical correlations were so obvious that they did not need to be spelled out for the reader. And in any case, I did spell them out, and I hope it makes understanding the legends of the Pale Prophet a little easier. The more overt relationships of the legends of the Gospels will be dealt with in a separate article, he says. Now, the tribal memories of flying saucers. Let's now return to the ancient astronaut's view and the aforementioned essays by Hansen in a piece called Tribal Memories of the Flying Saucers, reprinted in full in the New Global Communications release. Hansen disguises herself as a Navajo Indian named Ogamake, but the style of the writing is unmistakably her own, even as she hides behind one of her known pen names, an identity that is again male, along with being a pseudonymous Native American. And this is the piece she had to pay in the pre-feminist years, the price she had to pay in the pre-feminist years of the late 1940s when the essay was originally published. And the essay begins, most of you reading this are probably white men of a blood only a century or two out of Europe. You speak in your papers of flying saucers or mystery ships as something new and strangely typical of the 20th century. How could you but think otherwise? Yet, if you had red skin and were of the blood which had been born and bred out of the land for untold thousands of years, you would know this is not true. And she said, the essay continues, you would know that your ancestors living in these mountains and upon these prairies for numberless generations had seen the ships before and had passed down the story in their legends, which are the unwritten story of your people. You do not believe? Well, after all, why should you? But knowing your scornful unbelief, the storytellers of my people have closed their lips in bitterness against the outward flow of this knowledge. Yet I have said to the storytellers this, now that the ships are being seen again, is it wise that we, the elder race, keep our knowledge to ourselves? Thus, for me, an American Indian, some of the sages among my people have talked, and if you care to, I shall permit you to sit down with us and listen. Ogamake Hansen then shifts to a dialogue with the aged chief of the Paiute Native American Indian tribes. The chief begins by saying, you asked me if we had heard of the great silver airships in the days before the white man brought his wagons into the land. We, the Paiute nation, have known of these ships for untold generations. We also believe that we know something of the people who fly them. They are called the Have-Musuvs. The flying saucer occupants, the Have-Musuvs, first came to the area in large rowing ships before the land became a dry desert. After the waters dried and the rowing ships were no longer of use to them, they created flying canoes, which grew to become large silver ships with wings. The Have-Musuvs built a city in the nearby caverns, where they dwelt in peace and were far removed from the bloody warfare of other local violently combative tribes. Olga Mackey Hansen asked, "Have you ever seen the Have-Musuvs?" And the chief replied, "No, but we have many stories of them. There are reasons why one does not become too curious. These strange people have weapons. One is a small tube which stuns one with a prickly feeling like a rain of cactus needles. One cannot move for hours, and during this time the mysterious ones vanish up the cliffs. The other weapon is deadly. It is a long silvery tube. When this is pointed at you, death follows immediately." The chief described the appearance of the Have-Musuvs. He said, "They are a beautiful people. Their skin is a golden tint, and a headband holds their long dark hair. They dress always in a white fine-spun garment which wraps around them and is draped upon one shoulder. Pale sandals are worn upon their feet." The chief tells a fascinating legend said to have happened many years before the coming of the Spanish. A Paiute chief lost his bride to sudden death. In his overwhelming grief, he went seeking the Have-Musuvs in order that they put him out of his misery with their deadly silver tube. As the mournful chief climbed the last mountain on his quest, one of the men in white appeared suddenly before him. Brandishing the silver tube and motioning the chief back, the chief made signs that he wished to die and continued onward. Then others of the Have-Musuvs appeared and decided to take the chief with them. Many weeks after his people had mourned him for dead, the Paiute chief came back to his camp. He had been in the giant underground valley of the Have-Musuvs. He said, "Where white lights which burn day and night and never go out or need any fuel, lit an ancient city of marble beauty." There he learned the language and history of the mysterious people, giving them in turn the language and legend of the Paiutes. He would have been content to stay among them forever in the peace and beauty of their life, but they bade him return and use his new knowledge for the people. Olga Mackey Hansen then asks the current Paiute chief if he believed the story. And the old man replied, "I do not know. When a man is lost in Tomesha, a particularly forbidden stretch of hostile desert, the fire god is walking across the salt crust. Strange dreams like clouds fog through his mind. No man can breathe the hot breath of the fire god and long remain sane. This has always been a land of mystery. Nothing can change that. I must still answer your question with doubt in my mind, for we speak of a weird land. White man does not yet know it as well as the Paiutes, and we have ever held it in awe. It is still the forbidden Tomesha, the land of flaming earth," he said. The short essay of Olga Mackey Hansen wonderfully embodies such much classic ancient astronauts lore as well as timeless legends of a paradise hidden within the earth, which was also spoken of by the Tibetan seer T. Lobsang Rampa and many others. Global Communications offer several of Rampa's titles to those seeking further enlightenment on the universal legends of Shangri-La. In any case, the search for the Pale Prophet in ancient America opens the reader to a whole new treasure trove of possible alien visitations to a land and a people long thought of as backward and savage. The Lord of Wind and Water and his civilizing influence on Native America is echoed not only in the Gospels but the stories of ancient Sumer, Egypt, and Babylon, and who unfortunately created gods from the sky with the beginnings of their organized societies, who uniformly credited gods from the sky with the beginning of their organized societies. That same helping hand also came to the ancient Americans, while generally acknowledged to be true, has never been told in quite the same way as it has by L. Taylor Hansen in The Search for the Pale Prophet in Ancient America. Isn't that amazing? And this is by Bended Reality. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.